Hi there, I'm Robin Altman from Radiate Coaching, and in this video we are going to get up close and personal with one of Canada's most respected media and entertainment industry role models. Kevin Shea has so graciously agreed to join us today to offer some precious and not often discussed wisdom about guiding our professional lives, especially for those nearing their second act, so to speak. So thanks for stopping by to watch this video, and thanks especially to our guest of honor, Kevin Shea. Kevin is an award-winning entertainment, broadcast, cable, and telecommunications executive and one of Canada's pioneers in the media, entertainment, and cultural industries, spanning more than 40 years. As a senior corporate executive from a young age, his early 20s in fact, Kevin had a hand in the birth of today's biggest Canadian media players like Rogers and Bell, always on the cusp of innovation. In fact, you can't fully understand Canadian media until you know his story. Kevin founded or launched key broadcast and entertainment brands, most notably YTV, Sirius Satellite Radio, Life Network, and Prime TV. At various other points, he served as president and COO of the Global Television Network and Atlantis Communications. Throughout his career, Kevin has served on more than 20 industry boards, including festivals, alliances, and associations. Among them, the Canadian Film Centre, the Canadian Association of Broadcasters, the Banff Film Festival, Canoe FM, Canadian Women in Communications, and the Canadian Cable Television Association. In August 2006, Kevin was appointed chair of the Ontario Media Development Corporation, which he occupied for 8 years. In 2012, Kevin won Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee Medal for outstanding contribution to Canadian broadcasting. Kevin has also always been active in the public and not-for-profit sectors. Many of us know him for his leadership with Trip Canada over the past 15 years to build homes for tsunami survivors. He's also served as CEO of the Toronto Tourism Recovery Alliance in the aftermath of SARS in 2003. Kevin has occupied positions with CN Tower Limited, the Children's Broadcast Institute, the Canadian Landmine Association, Toronto Olympic Arts Advisory Committee, the Wheelchair Basketball Association, the Canadian American Business Council, and the National Capital Commission. Kevin was also on the board of Red Leaf Communications from 1993 to 2003, overseeing all advertising and marketing campaigns for the Honorable Jean Chrétien as he won an unprecedented 3 consecutive majorities as Prime Minister. To this day, Kevin still rides the innovation wave as the principal of his consulting firm, Shea Communications, occupying the role of director or advisor for countless content companies and digital startups, most recently Reclaim and Influicity. So for many, myself included, Kevin remains our mentor, an unparalleled strategist, expert networker, independent thinker, and impeccable communicator with boundless wisdom. In this interview, Kevin shares his wisdom on the key qualities it takes to create a wonderfully fulfilling second act, so to speak. You'll learn about Kevin's career progression and what he gave up early on to become successful, and yet how what he gave up still played a part in his success later on. Kevin also shares several tips on what you can do right now to stay engaged and relevant way beyond the day you formally retire. And for those curious about the evolution of the media, broadcast, and telecommunications industries in Canada, you're in for a real treat as you learn the key factors that kept Kevin's career in play all the way through to today. So without further ado, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Kevin Shea, and I sincerely hope that this conversation is enriching for you. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yay, we'll hear the audience all clapping. So Kevin, this all started with me and you on the phone the other day, and you became very animated about speaking with others about moving into this next chapter, this second chapter. Can you share with everybody what makes this such an important topic for you to talk to us about?
Well, I think as we were saying, I mean, people who were, given ample notice that they were retiring, have had the time to be able to do some planning around their next act. Um, Most put travel on the agenda. Others taking up hobbies that they've always wanted to pursue, whether that's, woodworking, playing the piano. um, Many will suddenly get much more serious about exercise and so on. Kind of wish they'd start earlier in that regard, but that's okay. Um, and and then of course there's those where retirement comes, out of left field. Either the company was purchased, and subsequently a lot of changes were made, and or the economic situation just forces a bunch of people to retire early. Um, in either situation, um, the most important thing is recognizing that your world's going to change. Um, you know, don't think you're going to be on everybody's party list for the remainder of your retirement period. It's really funny in this market and economy. Once you no longer hold or have the position that you had, and assuming if you had a position of importance in your sector and so on, that people are going to continue to treat you in the exact same manner. Life is very funny that way, and you best become aware of the fact that terrible term, but you're a has been in that particular regard. The other thing that I've advised people of is it's a great opportunity because of obviously the wisdom that you've gained in your sector, the connections that you've made across the many companies you may have worked for. That is of real value to other people. So who's that of value to? Joining boards of both companies, joining boards of charities, and public service, which many people are not even aware of, does provide, some connectivity and kind of extension of your credentials in your retirement. Quite often, charities make it well known that they're looking for directors. One does not have to take the various courses to become a director of a corporation. Some organizations might insist upon that, and if that's the case, they also will subsidize that. But my favorite is looking at public appointments through the federal government, the provincial government, and local city halls.
I really appreciate you sharing the truth about your experience and how you see it when you're reaching this transition. There's always the questioning around, what is my contribution now? Or how can I stay relevant in the minds of people? Or how can I continue to feel a sense of purpose? One of the things that got me so excited about talking with you is that you have managed to do that. And you still are that person that we all come to for advice and for guidance. You talked about boards and becoming active in that way. I'm wondering if there's anything else in your own experience that has helped you stay this relevant, this involved.
Well, I think, staying connected and informed. And again, all various sectors have annual conventions and or trade shows. And, you may want to continue on your own dollar to attend those. And because it's all about networking, it's all about staying informed and staying connected. And, if you're looking to, again, either provide consulting services now that you're retired, or again, joining boards of directors or boards of advisors, you may want to consider attending some of those conferences to be able to stay in the loop. And then, don't be afraid to approach people. Go up at the end and introduce yourself and say, this is who I am. But it's continuing to stay involved, and you got to be proactive.
I want to share a story about how you came to be my mentor, actually, because it relates exactly to what you just said. We met when I was at TELUS and you were consulting for TELUS. And when I left, I received a phone call from you out of the blue. And you said, "Hey, it's Kevin." And I said, "Kevin." And when you called, I thought, "Oh my gosh, it's Kevin Shea calling me." And you said, "Let's have lunch." And I thought, wow, there would be nothing more wonderful than to have lunch with this individual who I always saw from afar. We never really had a lot of dealings because you were dealing with other individuals in the organization. We saw each other, but when you called, it touched me so deeply. So to your point, I have a feeling that everyone listening, whoever is out there and is, thinking about that second act, there are probably people in your own world right now who are in your midst. They could so use someone to have somebody on their side that they could talk to. I want to ask you, how did you come to make those choices about the direction that you wanted this part of your life to take, or this part of your career to take?
It's a good question, and I think I kind of, personally, I kind of drifted into a retirement plan, if you will. My last full-time job was very specifically to get the license for Sirius satellite radio in Canada. Very, very controversial subject because every Canadian radio station was opposed to it. There were cabinet appeals on the decisions. It had all the elements of a great war in broadcasting, if you will, with the CRTC and the government, and then a great win. I created Shea Communications. I wanted to continue to consult. I really was not interested in a full-time job anymore. All the funding for startups and technology and so on was just beginning. There was conference after conference. And I started showing up at these conferences with all these 20-year-olds, and picked up a number of advisory positions with these startup companies, which of course educated me profoundly in an area that I knew very little about. I mean, I'd come from the broadcasting world, which is, a tiny bit of technology. It's more creative. And then over the course of time, that led to meeting some of the various financial institutions that were backing some of these companies, which then led to them approaching me to serve in various capacities, either directors of startup companies, advisors to management in those companies. And it was a great and informative and financially positive role that I had for about 10 years. It won't necessarily come to you, even though you might be well known in your sector, because you have to keep active, you have to keep relevant, you have to keep aware. Otherwise, people don't think of you. They just say, "Oh, he's retired, he's gone."
Right.
it's staying relevant, and it's you know, making sure that you show up at things, and making sure folks know that you're interested in doing more. So it's a constant job of marketing.
Did you ever have a point in your professional life where you felt that you were at a career crossroads of some kind, where you really didn't have an answer and you were searching? Or was it always opportunities came and you caught the opportunities as they came? What was your reality?
Well, and this is all public, but I was at Rogers for about 10 years, and this is during the 80s, early 90s. And we were on the verge of bankruptcy twice, because we had a very, very aggressive plan in acquiring companies and so on. There were a number of fiscal events during the 80s that rocked every company. So certainly during those periods, I'd be thinking, wow, am I in the right sector? I mean, I knew from a young child that I didn't want to work in the broadcasting communications business. But there were certainly times in the 80s driven more by financial instability of, am I in the right place? And then nearer to the end of my career, and I think this is when I was at Global, was really when the internet started to have impact on broadcasting. No one ever thought that television, radio would really be impacted the way it was, and it happened very quickly. With over the top networks, with I think back to newspapers and magazines. Let's say 15 years ago, every section in the newspaper, whether that be travel or health, sport, all became television networks, became specialty channels, and those sections of the newspaper, real estate, so on and so forth, classified, disappeared. I mean, absolutely disappeared. And I'm always surprised by the fact that the inventors, the entrepreneurs of the new businesses in communications weren't the existing players. Broadcasters didn't invent Netflix. They could have. Many broadcasters didn't invent specialty networks. They were invented by third parties. They could have. So when I was at Global, and as I say, I could see the world changing. It was very difficult to get management to focus on any kind of innovation, because it was, they're not going to last. I mean, we're here forever.
Right.
And that's when it was more or less around that time that I thought I really have to start to pay far more attention to the technology of the internet, because that's where things are going.
So I hear that the broadcast industry was a place that you always thought that you would be, broadcast entertainment media, from a very young age, and that for you, it sounds like it was a practical reflection, in the sense of you looked at the landscape of the industry, you looked at where innovation was going, you were curious about that, and you guided your career based on where you thought the industry was going. I don't know if I'm capturing that, but I even remember in our earlier conversation, you talking about how your first full-time job in the cable industry came from that curiosity, that you just walked right into an organization.
I remember well. Um, I had written my last exam at York University, and on my way to York school every day, I'd pass this little company called Scarborough Cable TV, and I really had no idea the future of the cable industry and so on at the time. As far as I was concerned, cable just made your signals for existing broadcasters, American and Canadian, clearer, better, stronger.
Right.
Um, I had an interview set up for the CBC. I was interested in those days in reporting and television news. It was one of my kind of key interests. And this is early May, and I had an interview set up in June. Anyway, I stopped in at Scarborough Cable late in the afternoon. And I wanted to see if they had any kind of information or magazines or whatever on the future of the cable industry. And I'm there, people are paying their bills, buying converters, signing up for that. And I walk up to the receptionist and I said, would there be somebody I could talk to about the industry, the cable TV industry? I'm interested in finding out more. She kind of gave me a strange look and said, just hang on a second. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, the door opens and out comes this woman and she says, who's here trying to find out about the cable industry? And I looked over and says, over here. And she said, follow me. So I followed her into her office, and it was evident to me, given the size of her office, that she clearly had a position of power in the company. I find out she's the president. Anyway, we had a great conversation. I learned a lot more about the cable industry and where it was headed, and mentioned to her that I had an interview lined up with the CBC, that I was interested in journalism. And she at one point said, you do not want to work for that pinko communist organization, the CBC. I thought, okay. Anyway, by the end of the hour, I was hired. She said, I want you to come work for me. I'm going to put you in every department for 2 weeks because I want you to know everything about our business. Wow. And then we'll see where we go to from here. But you'll go to the programming department last. And I ended up 2 years later as the vice president of programming for Scarborough Cable. It became much more than Scarborough Cable. We were one of the first Canadian companies to get involved in cable in the States. We had a series of magazines, and I was there for about 5 years. Phenomenal, luck and timing in life is everything, and you got to go door knocking. You do have to be aggressive. It's not going to come to you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what I one of the big lessons I take from this is the proactivity. Is that I forget the expression, luck equals opportunity plus preparation. Yes, you might consider yourself lucky because of the timing, but another thing to note about this is that the cable industry wasn't anything of note at that time. It was completely new. It was considered the startup of the time, right? So you walked into a place that wasn't this big monolith like Rogers is now or Bell Globe Media is now, right? You walked into a startup, an engine that could, and you had an opportunity from somebody who she herself was growing and had the foresight to know that this was going to explode, but you didn't, and you went with it.
And Robin, it's very true. I mean, CNN didn't exist, A&E didn't exist, HBO didn't exist back then. But what I learned from her was that the future was in multi-channel distribution, and that there were going to be opportunities. Remember, cable only had 12 channels back then, but they were soon moving to, 32 channels, 52 channels. Channel converters are being invented. But it was at that point that I learned that this whole notion of multi-channel specialty programming was the next real opportunity in the broadcast world. Took
Yeah.
many years, many years,
Yes.
but inevitably, that's what it became. To be clear, cable and broadcasting, those two were enemies back then. Cable companies, by regulation and law, were not allowed to own broadcast channels back then.
Yeah.
And broadcasters really didn't like cable because they felt that they just stole their signals
Right.
and put it out to a broader audience, but they didn't pay anything for it.
Right.
So consumers are paying their cable bill, and CTV or CBC were getting nothing for it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of animosity between those two sectors for a good 20 years.
It's amazing.
Now they all own each other.
It's so amazing. It's almost like radio and television had their rift, and this one, it's almost like that cycle just continues in different permutations of it, right? But
Exactly.
again, I think you're pointing to there were dangers, there were risks, there was instability, there was uncertainty, there were all these things, but you still chose it and went for it because you were looking at, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I hear that you were looking at the future and saying, either way, this is going to grow.
Yeah.
I have a question just to go back, because there are some people I think going to be watching this that will be really, really fascinated that you shared that even before this cable career that you had, that you were an actor and you were a musician, but somehow you chose to let that go and move into the corporate world. So I'm really fascinated. Can you share a little bit about that with everyone?
So I think, like most 15 or 16-year-olds, I was in a band. I was the lead singer in a rhythm and blues band. Actually, the very last band I was with, a band called Ice. I'm now 17 or 18. It actually did very well. Like, we started to play some of the big clubs downtown, and I was pretty young for that lifestyle. And most of the folks in the bands that I was with at that point, because I went from band to band to band, were in their early 20s, and those were wacky, crazy days of drugs and so on and so forth. And I really wasn't a druggie, but around that same time, I started to do television commercials, and there wasn't a lot of work in Canada back then, believe me. And if you wanted to get into acting, it was, primarily the odd drama at CBC, and I mean odd, and TV ads. And so I did quite a number of commercials when I was a kid, which, paid great money. And the one thing you learn about being a young actor is all about rejection, which is very important, because you don't get every job. Anyway, I did a series of commercials for Colgate, with John Candy and Art Linkletter, that in their day became kind of a legend. Make a long story short, when we were launching YTV, some 20 years later or so, and we really wanted a headliner. We were a startup network with not a very big budget to launch the channel, and I reached out to John Candy, who I got to know quite well when I was a young actor, and he said, "If you're doing it, I'm coming up for free." And John opened the airwaves for YTV, and I think the entire media world was in shock that this little network was able to have John Candy as their opening act, and it was because this bond that we made when we were like 17 or 18.
Well, I think that's one of the qualities that stand out with you, is your ability to build and maintain relationships, long-term relationships with so many of us and be a constant presence in our life, even if we don't speak to you every day. And so I'm wondering if you can share with people a little bit about how did you let go of being the musician and the actor? How did you sort of leave it behind and be at peace with that? Was it a conscious decision to do that?
I realized as I was now getting into my early 20s and I'm at school or university, that I really wanted to be on the other side of the camera. I said, maybe one day I might return to the other side of the camera. Maybe one day I might. But I'm far more interested in the business side of broadcasting than the creative side. So it was a very conscious decision. But I had the benefit of those years, of learning a lot about production and how things got made and so on and so forth. So it was good.
Having that experience and sensibility, you were able to leverage and use that in the later parts of your career because you maintain that relationship with John Candy, and we all know that working with people on the creative side, it's a different kind of a conversation. It's a different reality. So you were able to take a lot of that experience and transfer it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, it was very beneficial having that creative background early in my career, and coming to the realization that I don't really want to be an actor. I'm glad I did it. Some people say I never stopped being an actor, but but I was far more interested in the business and the development of the business than necessarily being on air.
Gotcha. So that brings me to where you are today, and can you share with everybody the project that you're working on right now? Because I know how excited you are about it, and I want people to hear how things sort of, in a way, might come full circle. I might say. So tell us about this project that you're working on.
Yes, I'm actually an executive producer of a documentary on the impact of concussions on young kids, primarily teenagers, and young adults in sport. It has become a serious issue in soccer and in rugby, and our laws need to be changed in Canada. So we're working with the Canadian Concussion Foundation, a number of other producers that I've known for years. So it's kind of, it is kind of funny for me being an executive producer on this. I'm enjoying every minute of it. And it's a very important story that needs to be told. So we hope to be, we will be shooting this summer, releasing late fall, and it's an important story. It needs to be told, and parents need to be informed. So that's what I'm up to.
It's so exciting, and again, I mean, no surprise that you would find a way to get involved in a very important cause, a very important cause for our world right now, and something that's so in the zeitgeist right now. I myself have heard so many stories about people and concussions and young people.
Right.
Would you talk about a little bit about who you're working with and how that came about? Because I think people would be interested to know, in this stage of your career and your life, how did this all sort of happen for you?
So the Canadian Concussion Foundation was given a grant of $200,000 to develop a documentary. And they don't do documentaries, they do lobbying and government work. So the president of the association reaches out to a friend in broadcasting in Montreal and says, I need to talk to somebody that knows the television business. And he in turn says, well, it's, my good friend Kevin Shea, that's who we'll contact. Anyway, they called me out of the blue, told me what they were up to, what they were in need of. And a good friend of mine, Ken McDonald, who had just stepped down as the head of Discovery Network, knows all about documentaries. I, immediately phoned Ken. Ken said, this is a story that needs to be told. Let's work for them. So we came on as the original executive producers, and then have subsequently we've hired directors and writers and so on. So it's all about, as I've mentioned earlier, it's just about staying connected. To be able to continue to be able to make those kind of calls.
In this part of life, as in every, connections, relationships, putting yourself out there, staying informed, those are all very important things that keep these opportunities coming. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
One final question for people who are really reflecting on their next act right now. How do you think that the pandemic and what they're calling the Great Resignation impacts people who are moving into this second chapter? Where do they fit, if at all, and what tips would you have?
Very, very timely question. I mean, thank God in a way this is coming to an end, because if this was last year, attending anything was impossible because nothing was happening. Networking was all being done by phone, by email, very, very difficult. So, now that things are beginning to open up and people are actually congregating again, meeting, having lunches and so on, thank God, because, when you're engaged in pursuing your second act, it's and being proactive, it means you have to get out there to make those connections. You've got to go and organize lunches or organize drinks with people, attend things, as I said earlier. And then the other thing, Robin, I touched on it briefly, but I want to come back to it. Most people are not aware that there are literally thousands of public appointments, both at the federal government, the provincial government, and local governments, like the City of Toronto. These jobs are all posted on their websites. Their board of director positions. There's all sorts of public appointments that are open by simple application. There used to be a lot of political influence in who got those kinds of jobs, provincially and federally. Not so today. All you do is Google, Canadian public appointments, federal appointments, Ontario provincial public appointments, and there's the list and the instruction on how to apply.
Wow. I think what I'll do is, for everybody watching this video, I will provide the links below so that you don't have to look for them. So I will do that as I publish this video. So thank you so much, Kevin. When is this documentary going to come out, by the way? And do you have a title for it?
We've got so many titles in the mix. It'll be completed late fall, and we're hoping for a screening January, February, in that time frame.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's coming right up. That's very exciting. So, and for everybody here, tell us a little bit as we close, what does a week in Kevin's life look like now? You're up in Haliburton maybe, or no, you're in Brighton. Tell us what a week in the life of Kevin Shea looks like now.
Well, it is honestly a bit quieter. And summer's coming, so there's fewer board meetings. But typically, you're right, I'm between Haliburton and Brighton. All the kids live in Brighton, down in Prince Edward County. Haliburton's been a place I've been going to for 25 years. When I was right at the beginning of COVID, when things were all in lockdown, I'd always wanted to make a particular chair. So I invented this chair called the Halley hammock. I got 3 retired carpenters to help me design it. Ended up making hundreds and hundreds and selling hundreds. So that was a lot of fun.
Wow.
So I'm probably these days, in any given week, I'm kind of working 2.5 days, and that's enough. Gives me lots of time to be with grandkids and enjoy. So that's it.
It sounds like you have a lot of balance. You're still out there, and at the
Yeah,
same time, you have a big family. I know you've got 4 sisters, and how many grandkids at this point?
3 lovely grandkids. I'm very lucky.
Amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, Kevin, I want to thank you so much again for being here
Thank
with
you.
me. It's
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always such an honor. Anything else before we say goodbye,
No,
Kevin?
no, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's always
You
nice to, thank you.